I'm so excited to show you how to make this felt swan ornament. For this pattern, you can use freezer paper. I normally recommend stick-on stabilizer. Grab a small, sharp, short pair of scissors to cut out all of the pattern pieces. Freezer paper worked for this pattern because there's no beading to follow, so you can just peel it right off. We'll start by bedazzling the wing. My wing pattern has a front and a back, and we're going to stitch sequins in rows to the front. After every row, I would knot my thread just so it didn't pull. Don't forget, I have a detailed tutorial on how to stitch on beads and sequins. As an added little touch, I just stitched on a few sparkly beads, but this is optional. You could bead or embroider this however you would like. The basic steps for stitching on beads and sequins is I bring my needle up through the back of the felt, and then I slide on a sequin or a bead, position it, and then push my needle back down. Now we're going to sew the wing together. We're going to stitch the wing together along the top and then do some edge beading, stuff the wing with some batting, and then sew it closed. I have a detailed tutorial for how to do a blanket stitch as well, but basically you're bringing your needle up through both layers of felt and then pushing it back down through the loop you've created. I use hand quilting thread for this because it's just a dream to sew with, and it's also strong enough to do the beading. Speaking of beading, once we've sewn along the top of the wing, this is an optional step, but I added some edge beading to my design. I learned this from Indigenous styles of beading when I was a historical reenactor. It's also in my detailed how to stitch on beads and sequins video. At this point, we have a bedazzled taco. We don't want this wing to be floppy once it's sewn onto the swan. A little bit of batting helps it keep its shape, and then I did a running stitch. I'm stitching along the bottom of the wing front, stitching it to the wing back. For this stitching, just keep your stitches small. It's not load bearing. We just want to keep that batting contained. Once the wing is beaded, stuffed, and sewn, this is what it looks like. We'll set this aside, and now it's time to sew the body of the swan, and I start with the head because the most difficult parts to stuff are the parts you should sew first. I'm using a blanket stitch and stuffing and sewing, stuffing and sewing. Once the body was stuffed and sewn, I tacked on the wing to the front of the swan. I just used small little stitches, and I tried to make sure I didn't go through any of the beads by mistake. I sewed along the bottom of the wing and then pushed my needle through to the back of the swan. At the back, once again, just to keep the wing from flopping forward, I did a little whip stitch along the top of the body. When I was done, I knotted off my thread, and then I switched to black thread to sew on the beak. The beak pieces are mirror images of one another, but I started with the front to make sure it looked good. I just did a couple of stitches to position it, and then I held on the back piece of the beak, and then I went through the head, and each time I stitched, I was securing both sides on. When the beak was nicely secured to the face of the swan, then I moved on to sewing it closed. And for this, I just did a blanket stitch once again using black thread, but I made sure to keep my stitches really, really tiny. And when you're cutting out my pattern, normally it doesn't matter if you cut out on the inside or the outside of the line, but with this beak, cut out on the inside of the line, and that ensures that it's going to be the perfect, delicate shape for the swan face. I went through a lot of prototypes to get this. Then I stitched on the eye bead and added some string on the back for hanging. My other felt ornament patterns are much simpler, so let me know what you think of this.